It is Tuesday morning Nickelback time on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Good stuff coming up. Tale of two teams. Vikings floundering after that loss to the Cowboys. Gophers surging. 4 straight Big Ten wins alone atop the Big Ten West standings. Andrew Krammer will join me here in just a minute for our weekly film review, looking at the Vikings offense, the offensive line, and trying to figure out what and who gets the blame for an offense that hasn't been able to put teams away and hasn't been able to be consistent for the most part this season. We'll look at some specific things on the offensive line to try to get to the bottom of this. My least favorite team is my favorite team. Scratch that. Just call it my least favorite team. Segment with Keith Rashad on the Vikings. And just taking a look again at that Sunday game and all of the bad things that seem to happen in that game. And Randy Johnson, after that, talking Gopher football. That's the team you might want to latch onto for the rest of the year. We'll see Illinois coming up this weekend, and then showdown at Iowa, and then Indiana, and then showdown against Wisconsin. Opportunity right there to have a special season. Can they finish it? Can they do what they need to do to win the Big Ten West? We will find out as the year goes on. Let's get to it, should we?
Film review time on Daily Delivery. Andrew Krammer covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune, joins me on every Tuesday show. Film doesn't lie, Andrew. We might like it to, but the film does not lie about that Vikings game. They got absolutely worked on the offensive line in a lot of cases, and it affected Kirk Cousins, and they couldn't move the ball, and that's half of the story of their 20-16 loss to Dallas. I suppose the other half is not being able to stop backup quarterback Cooper Rush when they needed to the most. But we want to focus on kind of the ineffectiveness of the offense and just up, down, especially with the offensive line play. What did you see as you went back and looked at this game that stood out to you?
Yeah, and it's a good point about with Cooper Rush. I mean, the difference in this game was the Cowboys were able to get the ball to their top wide receivers with ease throughout the game, and the Vikings were not. And on offense, Kirk Cousins looked flustered throughout. Once Randy Gregory, once the defensive lineman for the Cowboys up front, Micah Parsons at linebacker, once those guys got pressure on Kirk, you saw Kirk and Clint Kubiak, I think, get pretty conservative in some of their decision-making. Clint, obviously, with the headset up high in the booth, he can see the offensive line getting demolished. He starts adjusting some of the things he's doing. Remember in the first drive, Kirk hits Tyler Conklin 31 yards down the field, deep go route. It looks like, oh boy, if the Cowboys want to stack the box, the Vikings are just going to take their shots and they're going to have them. Those dried up. Jefferson missed the one later on. I think it might have been even in the same quarter. But they didn't really go back to them at all. You saw some choice spots later in the game, but Kirk would check them down. And then they get into deep situations where it's third and long. And obviously they had no shot there. So this was just a situation where one thing after another went wrong. And when you go back and watch it, it's amazing to see how many hands were in all the failures, because it was from Tyler Conklin blowing a block to CJ Ham doing it to Dalvin seemingly missing a hole in the run game. I mean, it was just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it certainly was. And so as we try to parse it out, I think you're right. It's probably not one specific thing. It's kind of a domino effect, right? Like if you aren't able to keep clean protection, then Kirk Cousins' game starts to be impacted. And even when the pressure isn't as bad as it is, he's kind of, he's in the spot where he still thinks he's going to feel it and he's going to check it down, and a lot of short completions. And then it informs how Clint Kubiak's going to call a game, and maybe he's not as aggressive, and maybe he should have been more aggressive anyway. But it's all connected. It's just hard to figure out where it starts.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear guys like Dalvin Cook. We talked to him today on Monday, and he's talking about how we just didn't find ourselves, didn't get into a rhythm, and a big part of that is him. A big part of that is the running game. We all know this offense is at its best when it doesn't even have to get into third down. Like, that's a great situation for any offense, but particularly one where the quarterback's not mobile. He is not going to turn a negative into a positive when it comes to pressure. And you have an offensive line that's very susceptible to giving up pressure. So when you get into certain situations, you're just stuck with what you have and you can't do much. We saw that. We saw that on 3rd and 12 at the end of the game where Kirk basically just has to check it down to Tyler Conklin for 6 yards because he's got pressure of Garrett Bradbury right up the middle, like almost right away. And that gives Jefferson, that gives Thielen, that gives these guys no time to get downfield. It's happening in almost 2.5 seconds, which is kind of that threshold in the NFL. So I don't know kind of where you go from here, because if the offensive line is going to do this, where they play so well in Carolina, and they played very well against guys like Derek Brown, Hassan Reddick, very good rushers in Carolina, to this, where it's just, you're at home. It's supposed to be everything. You have all the advantages on your side. This is a good Dallas defense, but it's not even Chicago when they're healthy, and what you're going to face later with the Rams now, who just traded for Von Miller. You're going to get them in December. So all these things are going to stack up for the Vikings. It leaves Clint Kubiak, for instance, in a very interesting spot, because he knows these issues are there in the personnel and the offensive line. Yet you need to trust that you can get the shots downfield. And he just didn't have that trust on Sunday night. And the few times that they even called them in the second half, Kirk didn't seem to have that trust. And he just checked it down.
Yeah, and that's a problem. I mean, and they've, not putting a team away, they've kind of gotten away with it in past weeks. I think the Detroit game is a good example of that, where, they had the advantage, probably because even as stagnant as the offense was in that game, they didn't feel like they were threatened until they were. And I think it probably felt like that way in this game too, where, you had a 10-3 halftime lead. Cooper Rush is going nowhere. And then all of a sudden they hit that long play and it's 10-10. And then now you're like, well, now you're in a game now. You're going to have to score. And they just didn't have anything going. And I think that the particular plays you mentioned with Bradbury getting blown off the ball, and we've seen that in the games they've struggled, in particular in the past. And we saw it again. It's just like, if that's going to happen, even periodically, where you can't hold up on the middle of the line of scrimmage, that's a problem.
It is. And for a third-year first-round pick, this is not the development curve I'm sure they set out and hoped he'd be on. He needs to have gotten better at anchoring against big nose tackles. And they're playing really, he's doing this against anybody. This isn't just like, when he faces the Michael Pierces or Linval Josephs or whomever's considered a good nose tackle in the NFL nowadays. It's not like it's just those guys. You're seeing it against just anybody. Anybody's big 340-pounder. He is not able to prevent the line of scrimmage from going directly back into Dalvin Cook and Kirk Cousins. And you're getting pretty inconsistent play, which should be maybe expected from Ezra Cleveland in his second year and Oli Udoh in his first year as a starter. And so that's not helping anything. If you don't have that center that can really kind of settle that line down. And you're seeing that with Cleveland too. I thought Cleveland was actually the worst lineman on the field for the Vikings on Sunday night. And that's saying something considering all the highlights you were talking about, or lowlights with Garrett Bradbury.
Last thing, Andrew, they go to Baltimore next weekend. We just established the location, but metaphorically speaking, where do they go from here as an offense? How do they reestablish any kind of identity?
I think it has to be Dalvin Cook. It has to be finding a way to get this run game going. And one of the interesting things that they've done this year under Clint Kubiak and this coaching staff, and remember now, Rick Dennison's not there. He was the run game coordinator. He was the guy putting in all the game plans. He was the kind of that connection with Gary Kubiak and the old way of doing things in terms of it. We're just wide zone, then we'll mix it up with some inside zone, and we're not going to get too crazy. And Clint has come in and really instilled more of a multiple run game. They're doing gap scheme stuff, pulling power schemes. Sometimes linemen are missing assignments. Sometimes things are going a little awry. I wonder if it's too much. And I wonder if simplifying things in the running game could help them open things up a little bit in terms of just getting into more manageable third downs, not even having to get into third downs because you're in 2nd and 3 and you can go ahead and move on from there. So I think that it has to be Dalvin Cook. The reason why they did so well in Carolina was due in part because Cook looked healthy. He was running for 140 yards and Kirk Cousins was calm and he wasn't checking it down as soon as he thinks he felt pressure. And that was a big, big problem on Sunday night, was Kirk wasn't giving them a chance. And it felt like the play calling wasn't really giving them much of a chance either.
Good stuff, Andrew. Better than we saw Sunday night. That is for sure. We'll do this again next week. All right.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Good stuff from Andrew Krammer. Better stuff, I should say, than the pass blocking of the interior of the Vikings offensive line. Here are some Pro Football Focus numbers for you to chew on here. Garrett Bradbury, who we talked about on the segment, 31st out of 31. That's dead last among qualified centers in pass blocking grade this season. Oli Udoh and Ezra Cleveland rank 45th and 49th, respectively, out of 60 in pass blocking. Guards, all of them below average. Garrett Bradbury, the very worst. When you go up against a good team, those guys are going to struggle because all three guys are right in the middle there, and that is what you saw on Sunday night.
Welcome back to another award-winning segment of My Least Favorite Team is My Favorite Team, officially renamed My Least Favorite Team is the Vikings. I think Keith Rashad joins me off of another game that goes down to the wire, and this time they can't escape. They mess around with the backup quarterback. They can't move the ball. They refuse to move the ball. And it looks like they might get away with it because they do, thanks to the gift of 18 penalties. By the way, they had more first downs by penalty than by pass on Sunday night. If people were unfamiliar with that stat, if you didn't know that stat, Keith, but maybe it's better that they didn't get away with it, even though that would have helped their season.
I mean, we need to rename the segment. My least favorite team causes nothing but impotent rage, I think is maybe the better name for it. Right? Let's put it this way. Every weakness that we imagined the Vikings might have this season was absolutely on display in that game.
I blogged about that. Absolutely was. Yes.
I mean, you start with the coaching. Both ends of both halves demonstrated just how off. I'm sorry, Brent. I'm sorry. I'm going to use the word awful. All right. I'm sorry to our one fan, or I guess he's your fan. He doesn't like me that much.
He's coming around.
I'm sorry, Brent.
I think he's coming around to you.
We'll see. But I mean, how do you not call a timeout at the end of the first half?
I don't know. There's like 25 seconds left. And Cousins after the game said, "Well, I just let the coaches deal with that now because I'm not quite sure what they want from me," which was telling. Which was telling in and of itself.
In so many ways, it's like. But if you're Mike Zimmer, right? How do you not call that? If it is your responsibility, and if you've told your $33 million quarterback that you don't want it to be his responsibility, how are you not doing that? Maybe
Zimmer didn't want a timeout. Maybe he didn't think there was enough time left to score because he is very conservative at the end of first halves.
Well, not just conservative, but he is bad. He is bad at the end of first halves.
Yes.
And again, it speaks to exactly what we talked about last time around, that this guy should, but refuses to trust the best unit on his team. He should trust the best unit on his team, but he absolutely refuses. And so then the coaching was bad. And, despite all reports to the contrary, I am still of the opinion that it's possible that Kirk Cousins is an actual human being. And so a game where he didn't perform that well was bound to happen. It happens to people, right? And he is not infallible. And we've seen better quarterbacks have bad days as well, too. He did not play particularly well, but he was also not helped out by whatever it is that they were allegedly trying to do on offense.
Yes.
And then I'm just going to sit here real patiently before I talk about the defense. I'm just going to wait patiently.
Well, let's keep
waiting.
Let's keep talking about the offense for a minute because I want to read you a quote from Adam Thielen. Did you see the Adam Thielen
Okay,
quote?
I'll be patient. I'll be patient about our discussion with the defense.
Every game we just hang around, let a team hang around instead of just putting our foot on the gas and going. We went down and scored on the first drive. We have to put our foot on the gas. I don't know what we need to do that, but we've been saying it since week one. I kind of feel like Adam Thielen should be on this segment of this podcast. That's kind of what we've been saying since week one, isn't it?
I'm pretty sure his favorite team is his least favorite team as well, too.
It kind of seems that way. He grew up a big Vikings fan, did he not? They showed his Randy Moss Halloween costume from his youth on the Sunday Night Football broadcast.
I mean, when, if ever, and of course, whenever are they going to let their best unit actually perform?
They're not, because like you say, Zimmer wants the defense to be the hero, and they were set up to be the hero again, and again they didn't come through.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right. Well, I'll just keep waiting patiently about the defense. I'm just going to sit here.
You can now talk about the defense,
because I'm just waiting for you to give me your fancy Pro Football Focus stat that tells me that the defense is actually good.
Okay. Do you think
Pro Football Focus says the defense ranks number 5 in LMNOP, so they're pretty good.
Geez, so you know more about defense than Pro Football Focus, obviously. So, but the thing that we 100% agree on, actually, the two things we 100% agree on are: one, they need to trust the offense more, and two, the defense has failed them in very big situations, which is about all that matters in this league. You can take all the numbers you want. If you're not getting the one stop you need, it doesn't really matter.
Well, that's absolutely true. And to the extent that this defense has any positive statistics, it is undoubtedly because they have played Jared Goff. They have played a Baker Mayfield who tried to throw the game away. They've played, what was that goofball?
Sam Darnold.
They have played a succession of really terrible quarterbacks. And imagine when Aaron Rodgers does get a hold of them.
Lamar Jackson next week.
How many times did you see passes to wide open receivers last night? Just unbelievable. We've said it before.
They gave Cooper Rush like all this cushion. Like Cooper Rush was going to carve him up if they didn't show this journeyman some respect.
And we've said it before, right? That if the pass rush doesn't get there, the rest of the defense cannot make up for it.
Right. So when they lost to Neil Hunter, yeah, exactly. Right? You were going to say that.
Then it's all over. It's just over for this really bad defense that Zimmer still wants to trust. And as you said, had yet another opportunity to be the heroes of the game, had yet another opportunity to finish it off for the team, and could not do it for what now, the 7th game in a row?
Yeah, I mean, it's been they've had, I think, 5 opportunities where they were either tied or gave up the tying or go ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter or overtime this year, something like that. Go ahead points, something like that. So
Pro Football Focus thinks they're great. So you just
Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders. You take up your beef with them. I am merely the messenger. I'm the conduit of information as a journalist. I am merely here to spark discussion about these things. I would not profess to know the deep inner workings of football.
You're just asking questions.
I'm just asking questions.
You're just asking questions.
I do want to share with you another stat that I like. Going back to the offense for a minute here. I don't like this stat, but I think it's a telling stat. So Vikings again, first drive is beautiful. This is like the same. This is another problem this year. So is the top heavy roster, where they lose a guy like Neil Hunter and there's no making up for it. But they go down. The scripted drive is beautiful. They score a touchdown. Then everything after that is not good. After that first drive, Kirk Cousins had 20 completions. 12 of them are what Football Outsiders would call failed completions, which means they didn't get a certain amount of yardage on first, second, or third down to make them successful plays. They were just dink and dunk, throwing short of the sticks all night, whether it was, putting them in favorable situations on first and second down or not getting the yards you needed on third down. And that's just, I don't know if it's a function of him checking it down, if it's a function of them being scared, if it's a function of the offensive line and Garrett Bradbury getting blown off the ball repeatedly, probably all of those things, but that was a factor the other night too.
Well, absolutely. And like I started with, Kirk Cousins is a human being, and he had a bad game. And why exactly he had that bad game, I'm sure there are some factors above and beyond his offensive line wasn't terrific, but it wasn't as bad as we've seen it in the past as well, too. So it kind of seems like he was seeing ghosts, as they say.
Primetime Kirk, baby. It's not been great.
Yeah, he's not performed well in a lot of these situations. And we also know that he doesn't have that same consistent level of play through an entire season, that he goes up and down. We've had our Kirktober, and now we might be moving into a stretch where maybe he's not so great for whatever reason. It seems to happen with him. But even so, there were plenty of times when he it did exactly what you talked about, was check down when we know that play couldn't work. And he almost seemed as if he was unwilling to take chances after Justin Jefferson should have run that ball down that he quit on, and was not as willing to move forward from that point forward. And so, but there were times when maybe they should have run the ball and stuck with it when they could have. There were times when they certainly should have thrown it more. There were times when they just panicked. There were times when Kirk just didn't play well. And it's going to happen. They still should have beat a third string quarterback or a backup quarterback against a team at home where Zimmer and his pretty precious defense could have saved the day. And so, unless the offense scores 25 to 30 points every game, right, the rest of the team is not good enough to make up for it. And that is especially on Zimmer and his defense he loves so much.
It absolutely is. We'll see what new and creative way they figure out to frustrate us next week. This is the stretch. That game was, it was going to be a kind of a toss up no matter what. Even when Cooper Rush, a huge break and not getting Dak Prescott, you felt like, okay, this is an opportunity. That game was in the context of their season. That was so important. Just, the season's not officially over right now, but if you win that game, you suddenly feel like you have a much better chance of getting through this, hard stretch of your schedule with Baltimore, the Chargers, and Green Bay in better shape. And now you're like, it's like you're just in scramble mode. So now can they, make us believe again by somehow beating Baltimore and containing Lamar Jackson next week? And I'm not all that confident, especially with the reported prognosis on Daniil Hunter that Ben Gessling has put out there already today, which doesn't make it sound like he'll be back anytime soon.
Well, last night felt like it might have been a breaking point. You just read the quote from Adam Thielen. At what point does the offense just get too frustrated with the way this regime is running things? If Zimmer is the one who's truly in charge and he couldn't call a timeout when they needed one on offense at the end of the first half, but called 17 timeouts at the end of the second half when it cost him a penalty, right? There's got to be a disconnect there as well, too.
There does. It feels like it's heading the other direction, but, this is the NFL, so we will see. We'll do this again next week, and we'll sure to be angry, I'm guessing.
If you're still holding out hope for the playoffs, by the way, the site 538.com gives the Vikings a 24% chance of making the postseason at this point. That is not great. New York Times and Football Outsiders a little bit more forgiving, 31 and 35% respectively. But you see the damage done by some of these games the Vikings probably should have won earlier this year. Most certainly that Dallas game against backup Cooper Rush being chief among them.
Tuesday is on Daily Delivery. I talked to Randy Johnson, does a great job covering Gopher football for the Star Tribune, covering the football team in town that doesn't make everybody upset, at least not yet. Kind of a carbon copy of the Maryland win. Lots of runs, lots of comfort at the end. 41-14 at Northwestern is about as businesslike and impressive at the same time as I would have imagined that win to be.
Yeah, it was a pretty good performance, both sides of the ball by the Gophers. 53 rushes, 306 yards. Two backs go over 100 yards. So, that was very workmanlike, I guess. And then early on, the defense gets a scoop and score after a forced fumble by Mariano Sori-Marin. Freshman Justin Wally takes it back on Northwestern's first play from scrimmage, and all of a sudden the Wildcats are down 10-0, and Gophers, even a little bit of first half, not being able to capitalize fully on their deep drives into Northwestern territory, settle for a couple field goals. But, second half came out and took care of business pretty well.
Now, we keep saying they're going to have to throw the ball at some point. I don't think we thought that Northwestern would be that game. Do you feel like when they've been throwing lately that there are things you like to see, or are there still some prove it things in the past game once we get to, a little bit more of the depth in their schedule coming forward here?
Yeah, I think they've been decently thrown it. They've also, they've kind of developed a nice weapon in Mike Brown-Stevens, who's averaging about 26 yards a catch this season. He's had a couple nice plays against Northwestern, led him in receptions with 4, which, doesn't sound like much, but it got him downfield pretty good. They're going to face bigger challenges on defense, especially when they play Iowa and when they play Wisconsin. That's going to be the biggest test. This week against Illinois, maybe not so much, but you want to be able to balance out a bit, not necessarily 50-50, but you need to be efficient. And so far they have in the last 4 games, at least.
Now they're leading the Big Ten West right now, 4-1, 3 teams below them at 3-2, Wisconsin, Iowa, Purdue. They've of course already beaten Purdue. Gophers play Illinois here at Minnesota next weekend, and then it's at Iowa. Then you got Indiana, and then Wisconsin here to end the season. Those are, I think Indiana's winless in the Big Ten right now. Illinois not having a great season. They fell back to earth after that Penn State upset they lost to Rutgers, right? So figure take care of, you don't want to overlook those 2 games, but if you imagine that they're going to be able to have this kind of ball control against those 2 teams, sets up pretty well for them, like we've been saying, and they keep taking care of business. Who's the team that you think if you're a Gopher fan, who do you have to think about more right now? Is it Iowa or is it Wisconsin?
Well, as a fan, you can think about it, whoever you want, and you'll look at both of those. The team, they'll be focusing on Illinois, obviously, first. Right now, Wisconsin looks like, they took care of Iowa pretty easily, 27-7. They look like the same old Badgers on defense. They're very good on defense. Iowa's been a team that's feasted on turnovers all year, and they've used those as fuel. But when they don't get those, they get in trouble a little bit. Their offense can be shut down. Wisconsin's offense can be shut down at times too. It's we're not talking, Badgers teams with Jonathan Taylor there. They have a decent running game, but it's Mertz is a bit. He hasn't been the biggest, the best answer at quarterback over the years. When you compare,
how do you think they're feeling right now? I know they take this 1 week at a time. That seems like a good model to have. That said, they're bowl eligible now. How big are their goals right now, and how good do you think they are?
Good question. They try to the players basically try not to look ahead. They'll there's a little bit of that after the game on Saturday, just the fact that they're leading the division. I think it's in their mind that what happened against Bowling Green, they have to guard against something like that. I'm sure though, deep down they've got those two rival games circled. They haven't defeated Iowa under Fleck. They're 1-3 against Wisconsin. Won the Axe in 2018. Then in 19, Wisconsin came in there basically for the West Championship and won it. So I'm pretty sure they remember those games pretty well. And they were talking about that 19 season after the game, and basically saying how they've learned from that November that didn't go quite the way they wanted it to after the big upset win over Penn State. Yeah,
that's a good point. I mean, that year, last year was such a weird year. It still feels like 19 is, really fresh. And this is a different team than that year, than that team. They're the skill position wide receivers are much different. You had some NFL talent, on at the skill positions on defense that year too, with, Antoine Winfield Jr. in particular. As you think about those two teams, making a comparison is maybe unfair, but do you feel like this one is built to have a special season like that one did, to a degree, or are they going to run into roadblocks along the way here?
I think that really depends on what happens in Iowa City and what happens on Thanksgiving weekend here in Minneapolis. Those two games will tell what this team ends up as. You could go from a good to a great to an exceptional season if you get to Indy for the Big Ten title game and win that West. It does come down to those games. It is a different team than the 19-1. I don't offensively not as talented in the skill positions, and obviously their depth is at running back is being tested very, very heavily there. But the offensive line, I would say, is better. It's most of the same people from that team, and they're 2 years older and playing very, very well right now. The offensive line, and then they're great blocking from the tight ends, especially O'Keefe.
They lost another running back, didn't they? Is that their third one that went out?
Yeah, Bryce Williams went down after a nice gain, 19-yard gain on a pass out of the backfield, and got tackled on the sideline. Looked like his left leg got rolled over, so possible foot or ankle. But Coach PJ Fleck said today that he's licensed for the season. So that's the third following Mo Ibrahim and Trey Potts. Now they're down to the two guys that got them 100-yard games on Saturday, and then their third back now is Derek LeCaptain, converted linebacker, special teams player who was an outstanding running back in Wisconsin, in high school in Wisconsin. He has the all-time Wisconsin record for yards from scrimmage. So he has a lot of experience there. That'll help. And he had a nice 24-yard touchdown run against Northwestern where he broke about 3 tackles.
Okay, so as long as they can keep the last ones standing, they'll be all right. Well, good stuff, Randy. Another big game next weekend, but the one we're really looking forward to is that Iowa game. I think that's going to be pretty fun down in Iowa City, and that's why these guys play, right? They don't want to shy away from these moments.
Yeah, you'd think you go into those games, you don't want to start looking, okay, if you have to lose here, where do you have to win? It's like just take care of what's ahead of you. That's the funnest way to do it.
Absolutely. Good stuff, Randy. We'll do this again next week.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mike. Talk to you later.
Love talking to Randy Johnson. Good stuff as always. Looking forward to the rest of this Gopher football season. It should be a fun November, no doubt about it. That will do it for today. Talking to Chris Hine, I believe, on Wednesday's show. Got to get to the bottom of what is going on with the Timberwolves. They beat the Bucks in Milwaukee 3-1. Everybody excited. Since then, home losses to a shorthanded Denver team, and then Monday night losing to Orlando at home after leading for a lot of the first 2.5 quarters of that game. Just a terrible loss, especially the way it happened. It ended up being pretty lopsided. So I'll talk to Chris about what is going on with that team on Wednesday's show. Thanks for joining me here today. We'll be back at it on Wednesday.